Today, we're gonna review the best states for off-grid living, the worst states for off-grid living, and everything in between. Today, we're diving in to off-grid guides. Off-grid guides is the new project that we've been working on just to be able to share what we've learned in terms of what states and counties can give you a good off-grid experience. We built some new tools in the Acorn Land Lab software set to be able to help us review rainfall data, zoning data, temperature, political climate, topography, population density. I mean, the list goes on and on for the basic metrics that you can use to move off grid. Now, at some point, you've got to cut it because you don't want to be paralyzed by your analysis, but we've included a few dozen different metrics that we like to use for evaluating off-grid locations. There are 3,143 counties across all 50 states in the USA. The county is the smallest unit of measurement we used when measuring and evaluating off-grid locations. Let's dive in and start exploring a brief overview for each of the 50 states, and then our off-grid PDF guides that we sell on the Acorn Land Labs website will give you a county by county breakdown. All right, let's get started. Alabama. Alabama is Georgia's cheaper, in my opinion, cooler cousin. Land is affordable. The zoning is really non-existent in most of the places. The whole climate is similar to Georgia. I think more people are gonna flock to Alabama, particularly the northeast area of Alabama. That's where I would go if I was going off-grid. Go to North Alabama. I think it's underrated. Alaska. Alaska is off-grid paradise if you're a hardcore off-gridder. If you can handle the bears, if you can handle the deadly winters, and if you can handle the rugged terrain, Alaska could be so for you. Alaska's serious. It's deadly serious. If you're a beginner, don't go to Alaska. Arizona, for you off-grid desert dwellers. It's gonna be great to build an earth ship there. You're not gonna have much water. Water's a big issue. You need to be a special type of off-gridder to handle the desert. Just be advised. It is definitely doable, but I don't think it's for most people. But for you that like the desert, Arizona's great. Arkansas, underrated and affordable for off-grid living. Arkansas has got the fields, the forests, the streams, the creeks, some rolling hills. It is hot and muggy, but it's not gonna be nearly as bad as northern Florida, Georgia, Mississippi. People make jokes about these states, but for off-grid living, I'm not joking. It's a pretty solid choice. Off-grid living in California. If you can handle the wildfires, the earthquakes, Sacramento's zoning laws, and every other county and city in the state, in addition to the overburdensome regulation, you can make it work. But for most people that do not already live in the state of California, moving there to buy very expensive land in a high disaster prone area, it's just not a good fit. There's a lot of people doing the off-grid lifestyle in California, and it's beautiful. But today, the cons are really starting to outweigh the pros. Think carefully before moving to California. Colorado. Colorado is kind of like a baby brother to California in the sense that geographically, it's an amazing place for off-grid living, but you're getting more water issues. You've got more regulations piling up. You've got a different shifting political climate. Zoning can be strict. It used to be great. It can still be good, especially if you already own land there, but Colorado is gonna give you more challenges these days than it used to. But it's a lot of the man-made problems that are gonna give you a run for your money in Colorado. So you might wanna cool it on Colorado unless you're already there. Connecticut. Connecticut is a beautiful state. It's not a good one for off-grid living. The land costs are astronomical. The zoning is some of the strictest in the country. And unless you just come from old money and want to play it off-grid, avoid Connecticut. The leaf watching in the fall is beautiful. Don't get me wrong. But for normal people, don't go off-grid in Connecticut. Delaware is a lot like Connecticut. It's beautiful, but it's very tiny. It's very expensive, and the zoning is very, very strict. You'll see this pattern play out across small New England coastal areas. They're not ideal for off-grid living unless you start getting up into Maine. Florida. Florida can be a great state for off-grid living if you aim for that northern part of Florida. Florida was uninhabitable, basically, until air conditioning was invented. But if you're determined, Florida could work. You just got to deal with gators, mosquitoes, swamps, hurricanes, and increasingly sweltering summers. I'd avoid it, but for some people, they're into it. Georgia, my home state. I think Georgia's okay for off-grid living, maybe even good. Georgia's two states, North Georgia, South Georgia. For off-grid living, in my opinion, avoid South Georgia. Massive industrial ag, tons of gnats and mosquitoes. North Georgia's got the mountains, the creeks, the zoning can be strict, land prices are getting more expensive. That's why I say Georgia is okay to good. Hawaii. It's a tropical paradise. In fact, it's where the billionaires are building their off-grid doomsday bunkers. For us normal people though, forget about Hawaii. Too expensive, but that's okay. Off-grid living on the mainland is awesome. Idaho is one of the best states for off-grid living. Now, land prices have been getting more expensive because Californians are fleeing their expensive land, high taxes, and their restrictive zoning laws. But Idaho's got it all. They've got the mountains, they've got the water, the rivers, the creeks, the streams. Idaho, if you can afford it, is a fantastic option for off-grid living. Illinois, obviously nowhere near Chicago. Head farther south. You're gonna want to avoid the industrial ag areas. There are definitely pockets where you're gonna have a great off-grid experience, but avoid the industrial ag, avoid Chicago. That's basically the two rules for Illinois. Indiana is kind of like Illinois. You're going to want to head south for those rolling hills and the more rural areas. Avoid the metro areas with any proximity to Chicago or the bigger metroplexes. It's another big industrial ag farming state, so that's going to be a challenge. It's something where you're going to want to avoid those mega farms and the pesticides. Head for the smaller hollows and hills if you can. Indiana has still got some beautiful locations, no doubt about it. Iowa. Iowa has got some affordable land, but it's because it's another of the breadbasket states. You've got industrial ag everywhere, land of corn. But if you look hard, you can find affordable land. If you can tuck yourself farther away from the chemicals and the industrial ag, you could find an underrated gem. Iowa is not to be written off. Just do your homework. Kansas. Kansas has got affordable land, but there's a reason for that. Tornado Alley. Hot summers, frigid winters. If you can put up with that, you can get a steal on land in Kansas. If you've already got a community there, go rural. You'll find your spot, but I wouldn't do off-grid in Kansas just because I don't have any friends and family there, and it's very flat. Kentucky. Kentucky has got low population density. It's got rolling hills, creeks, hollows. There might be a few bears in Kentucky, but that makes it cool. Kentucky has got all the elements you'd be looking for that sweet spot. Forest, creeks and streams, mild weather in general. Louisiana. If you've got the skills and the giant beards, like the Duck Dynasty guys, you could rock it living off-grid in the swamps and the bayous. The reality for most of us, the hurricanes, the mosquitoes, the giant oil industrial complex and the chemical complex in the southern part, Louisiana's got some massive challenges. But if you've got the skills, and if it's home, sweet home, like the Duck Dynasty guys, you can make your off-grid paradise down there. It's not for everybody, but if you're a swamper, go forth. Maine. Maine has got low population density because it's a huge state. It's not quite as big as Georgia, but it's close. Maine has got some brutal winters. If you can put up the winters, then Maine is worth it. You've got so much forest, you've got mountains and hills, you've got creeks and streams, a gorgeous coast, plenty of resources. If you want to be farther out from the crowds, and if you can handle the cold, Maine is for you. Maryland. Maryland's a great little state. In general, it's not ideal for off-grid living. There's a little portion of Maryland to the west where you get up into the Appalachian Mountains. There's some small towns up there, you've got rural hills, you've got trees, you've got isolation. Off-grid living basically comes down to avoiding high population density areas. So Western Maryland is your best bet. Otherwise, in the eastern part of the state, you're gonna get so many zoning restrictions, expensive land, and headaches from all the crowds. Massachusetts. It's beautiful, but you've got to bring the dough. It's gonna be very, very expensive. You need Puritan patience to navigate the zoning requirements. Save up the money for your expensive land. The winters are gonna be colder, you're gonna need a lot of money. The scenery is beautiful. If you can find a small town and navigate zoning, go for it in Massachusetts. Michigan. Michigan has got some beautiful off-grid locations in the Upper Peninsula. If you want lakes and mountains and creeks and streams in isolation, head there. You've got to be winter rated though. If you can handle the winter, you'll thrive up there. The lower portion of Michigan can be fine if you find the right little nook and cranny. You just wanna be further out from those big metroplex areas like Detroit. Population density is everything for off-grid living. Less zoning and more affordable land. Minnesota. Minnesota is huge. You can find so many great off-grid locations here if you can handle the winters. Minnesota has got your lakes, your forests, your streams, but it's also got your ice fishing. And unless you're really just into ice fishing and logging and prepping for winter, Minnesota's gonna be a challenge. But if you head a little farther south, find those rural areas, Minnesota can have some good options. Mississippi. Mississippi land is dirt cheap. Mississippi is one of the poorest states in the nation, so of course the land's gonna be dirt cheap. The zoning laws are often almost non-existent. The southern portion of Mississippi is hot and sticky and humid. If you're gonna go off-grid Mississippi, head north. Mississippi can be a great option for the affordable off-grid experience if you can handle the heat. Missouri. Frankly, Missouri is one of the up-and-coming best states for off-grid living. It will come as no surprise that the Ozarks are going to be where you want to go. Missouri can have weather swings that are intense, much like my state of Georgia. But in terms of affordable land, the right balance of 4 seasons, and a off-grid friendly climate, you're going to be hard-pressed to beat Missouri. Montana. If you want to do off-grid living and pretend you're in a Robert Redford movie, Montana is the place for you. The reality is, a lot of the land parcels are huge, big ranches. You're often competing with people that have got celebrity-sized budgets for land in Montana. The land is not cheap, but the scenery is stunning. If you've got the resources and the community base out there, Montana can be fantastic. Nebraska. There's a lot more to Nebraska than corn, but barely. I'm kidding. It can be a good spot for off-grid living, but it's gonna have those frigid winters. You're gonna get tornadoes. It's very flat. If you already have a community there, go just to the peri-urban fringe of a big metro area and find a small, low-zoned piece of land in a county that's a little more laid back. Nevada. Nevada is another western desert state. Water is gonna be a massive issue. I am not particularly bullish on Nevada. If you're gonna be there, head north. It's gonna be hard to carve out a place that's sustainable and enjoyable in Nevada with the lack of water, the lack of green cover. It's a desert, so act accordingly. New Hampshire, another New England state. Live free or die is the motto. And I think New Hampshire often lives up to that. You're gonna have less zoning headaches than surrounding states. Land will be expensive because it's New England, but it's beautiful. You're gonna get 4 seasons, plenty of woods, rolling hills, small towns. I would consider New Hampshire if I had the budget. New Jersey, off-grid living, good luck. Unless you're in the Pine Barrens, I would write New Jersey off your list. Very expensive land, lots of strict zoning. If you do make it in New Jersey, you'll have some great pizza at least, but I don't think the headaches are gonna be worth it for New Jersey, unless you find some spot in the Pine Barrens. New Mexico. New Mexico is great if you're a desert dweller. If you like the desert dwelling lifestyle with your earth ships, your big water cisterns, your very mild winters, New Mexico could be for you. It can be done, and it can be done very well. It's just more of a specialty state. You've got to be down for off-grid desert living. New York. Now don't think New York City. Obviously, you're not going off-grid New York City. For New York State, go north. There are beautiful rolling hills, so much woodland, small forgotten towns, and surprisingly affordable land. You'll find all the elements you're looking for. Winters can be cold, but the small towns, they need people. Be part of the wave that revives these small towns in upstate New York. North Carolina. North Carolina is a beautiful state for off-grid living. Now, the reality is it's got a lot of the same struggles as Georgia. The coastal areas have got more humidity. The hurricanes are more of a threat. Western North Carolina has always been the off-grid hotspot. It's got the mountains, it's got the waterfalls, the creeks, the streams, 4 seasons. But even there, you're at risk from hurricanes and other natural disasters. But the scenery is beautiful. North Dakota. It's big. It is beautiful. There are rolling green hills. It's a big industrial ag state. You'll find it's got a lot in common with other states that have massive monocrop industrial farming. Don't let that deter you. If you're in the area, if you're looking for affordable land, North Dakota could be an option if you really don't want to be bothered by other people. Ohio, for off-grid living. Head south. Up north, you're gonna have Cleveland breathing down your neck. If you head south in Ohio, you're gonna have the rolling hills, forests. It's gonna be a little less densely populated. As part of the Rust Belt, I think Ohio is gonna have an influx of people moving to get to the better weather. No place in the US is gonna be without natural disasters, but I do think the Midwest, especially the Rust Belt, I'm very bullish on the Rust Belt. Currently, land there is affordable, it's cheap. The cities were designed to be enjoyable pre-car. Oklahoma. Oklahoma is Tornado Alley, but if you don't mind riding out a twister or two, Oklahoma can be a good option. Personally, I would stick to the eastern part of Oklahoma. Gonna be more verdant, green, more trees and forests. You'll find cheaper land out west, but I'd pay a little bit more and stick to the east. Oklahoma has got affordable land and very loose zoning. I think Oklahoma's a great option. Stick to the east side. Oregon has got stunning forests and rivers. Traditionally, Oregon and the whole Pacific Northwest area has been a prime spot for off-grid living. Recently though, there's some new pressures. Californians moving out because of high taxes, strict zoning, and the other issues there are driving up land costs in Oregon. Go to East Oregon. It's gonna be more rural, it'll be more affordable. The coast is beautiful, but it's expensive. Oregon does have more and more risks from wildfires and even, the whole heat dome problem they had in the Pacific Northwest. Oregon can be great. Just stick to the east side if you're more on a budget. Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania's got some great corners for off-grid living. If I was gonna go up there personally, I would find an Amish community and I would build my off-grid location very close to them. To be able to work with craftsmen like the Amish is a real privilege and pleasure. Now we've got this Mennonite-made shed. They were great to work with down here in Georgia. I would avoid areas where they're fracking just to try to have cleaner groundwater and avoid the denser areas with the zoning. Land will be pricier, but it might be worth it if you've got some great Amish neighbors. Rhode Island. Off-grid living in Rhode Island. Very, very, very tricky. Probably not impossible. If you've already got the community and the family, and if you've got the money to make it happen, why not? But if you're on a budget, and if you've got no other reason to go to Rhode Island, it's not gonna be a good fit for off-grid living. South Carolina. South Carolina is mostly low country. It's gonna be hot, it's gonna be humid, it's gonna be buggy. The land is definitely some of the most affordable in the nation, and zoning's gonna be more relaxed than your Georgias, than your North Carolinas. If I were going off-grid in South Carolina, I would head northwest towards the Blue Ridge Mountains. That's definitely where you'd want to be, kind of near Clemson, Seneca area, those foothills. That's exactly where I'd go. South Dakota. South Dakota is going to be just a shade warmer than North Dakota, but the winters are still going to be a challenge. The Black Hills are where I would go if I was going off-grid in South Dakota. You're going to have mostly affordable land. You're going to have gorgeous scenery. The winters are going to be brutal, 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 but South Dakota could be a fine option if you've already got community there. If you don't have community there, I don't know why you'd really move there unless you just really love the Black Hills, and some people do. Tennessee. Tennessee is consistently in the top 5 states for off-grid living. Low taxes, low zoning regulations, up until recently, pretty affordable land. And it's just gorgeous, especially Eastern Tennessee. These days, everybody and their uncle wants to go off-grid in Eastern Tennessee. The locals are not loving it because it's driving up land prices, but there's a reason it's so good for off-grid living. I would not consider Western Tennessee as much because you're not gonna get the same mountains, but you can still have a great time going off-grid in Western and Central Tennessee. But Tennessee's rolling hills, the low regulation and taxes, there's a reason it's so popular for off-grid living. So if you're wanting to go to Tennessee, do it sooner than later. Land prices are not going down. Texas. Texas is huge. If you're going off-grid in Texas, I would stick to East Texas. It's gonna be wooded, it's gonna be hilly, there's gonna be streams and creeks. The rest of Texas is either desert, oil-filled, ranch, or sinking into the Gulf. Texas is great. There's a little bit of everything for everybody. Personally, I would stick to the eastern part of Texas, away from the big cities. Utah. Utah's great if you love open skies, red rocks, and more stars than people. Utah's a beautiful state, but water's gonna be a big issue. The Great Salt Lake is slowly drying up, and there's gonna be more issues in Utah down the road. Personally, I would not be moving out there for off-grid living because of the water issues. But if you're already out there, you can find a good spot in Utah. Just really lock down that water source. Vermont. Vermont is postcard pretty. If you like deep snow and syrup tapping, Vermont can be a great option for you. Virginia. Virginia is a great option if you avoid the DC suburbs. Those are gonna be very expensive, and the zoning is gonna make sure you don't go off-grid anywhere there. Virginia is gonna be best if you head west towards the Blue Ridge Mountains. Lower zoning, lower prices of land, and a more like-minded community. Washington State. Western Washington is gonna have all the rain you could ever want. Eastern Washington is gonna be drier. There's gonna be more risk of fire. Washington, the whole Pacific Northwest area, is traditionally great for off-grid living. You're just gonna wanna avoid the big metroplexes, kind of like the Seattle area. You'll probably have an easier time out east in terms of fewer zoning requirements and more affordable land, but Washington can be a great option. West Virginia. Western Virginia is gonna have very cheap land, gorgeous scenery, but it's a very impoverished state. The small towns have got a lot of intergenerational just dependency on the government dole because industry dried up. The coal is really not employing nearly as many people as it used to. So West Virginia is gorgeous. You just have to know how to navigate the small towns. You know, you could go up there and do a lot of good, help revive some of those small towns in West Virginia. Wisconsin. Wisconsin's a great location farther up north. It's got the lakes, it's got the forests, got more affordable land than many areas. You're just gonna spend a lot of time chopping firewood and avoiding cheese-related puns. Wyoming. Wyoming is rugged, it is rough and ready, and it is really great for off-grid living. Wyoming is going to put your home design to the test. Make sure you build a wind-proof home. It's cold, but you've got that rugged, independent spirit alive and well in Wyoming. Washington, D.C. You're gonna have a hard time finding a place to go off-grid between the politicians and the monuments. You're not going off-grid there. Maybe try nearby Virginia or Maryland, but really just move. There you have it. All 50 states, plus Washington, D.C., high-level overview for off-grid living. My intent has not been to offend anybody. All 50 of these states, even DC, have got unique things that make them wonderful places to live. So we've got 50 guides for each individual state with all their respective counties. There's links below. We've got a guide that has the 200 best counties in the United States for off-grid living based on our off-grid algorithm and the metrics we evaluate. Then we've got a guide with the 200 worst counties for off-grid living. We've got a guide that just has your 50 state overviews, and then we've got a guide that's got all 3,143 counties in just short blurbs, like a high-level little blurb snippet. So we've got different formats that you could pull based on what your needs are and what you're wanting to learn. And then we've got a mega pack that's got the in-depth state and then all the counties within each state PDF guide, but we have all 50 states plus DC in the mega pack. Any proceeds we earn from selling these guides that we've compiled, we use to help further the Acorn Land Lab experiments, to produce more content, to teach more people about simple living, off-grid living, permaculture, sustainable gardening systems, and just building a more independent, resilient life that gives you more freedom and is easier on the world around us. Thanks so much for sticking with us. We hope you enjoyed it.